Welcome back to FPL Therapy, the weekly podcast hosted by me, FPL Raptor, where each week we are joined by a different guest. And I'm delighted to say that for Game Week 23, we have Luke. Luke is a massive Crystal Palace fan and also an FPL content creator as well. I will link both of his socials down below. He has a podcast, Luke Talks Palace, on YouTube and Spotify, and also creates content around Crystal Palace and FPL on his TikTok as well. So make sure to check those both out. But Luke, how you doing, my friend?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on. It's been nice being a fan of the show and finally coming into the studio. That's very exciting. And you know, Crystal Palace above Manchester United in the table this week, so perfect timing.
I warned him before we started this. This is not the way to start the podcast by upsetting the host. But yes, I didn't even realize that you were ahead of us in the table. I'm not going to lie, and Spurs fans will probably back me on this. I stopped looking at the table a while ago. Funnily enough, you do stop looking at the table when your team doesn't do very well. But we're going to discuss Palace today. I think a lot of people have Palace assets already. Maybe some still looking, especially at maybe Jean-Philippe Mateta, who we both love very much. And it'll be interesting to get your opinion, especially like Ismaila Sarr as well, because he's been very disappointing. So if you are interested in that Crystal Palace chat, it will be a little bit later in the podcast. This podcast is sponsored by Club as well, the wonderful free-to-play fantasy football mobile game. We'll talk a little bit about that later on, and Luke will hopefully help us to improve the club as well. If you're watching on YouTube, please make sure to subscribe, drop a little like as well. And if you're listening on audio, please rate 5-star, but also feel free to jump over to YouTube and subscribe because we're very close to 15,000 subscribers. I do appreciate all of the support recently. So we're both on green arrows.
Very good, very good. After a few weeks of some bad ones.
Finally, you had a few red arrows in a while.
Yeah, I think about 4 in my last 6.
Look at us. I've had 4 red arrows in a row.
I promise I'm not just here to copy you. I promise.
Okay, right. So we'll go through. We both actually plan a 4 at the back this week. So you're currently on 56 points. And as always, we record this on a Monday afternoon, ready for a Tuesday morning upload. So we've not seen Monday night football between Chelsea and Wolves. But yeah, 56 points. That is going to be a healthy green no matter what happens there. You've got Pickford in goal, which is good ahead of the double game week. Your back line is currently Trent, Gabriel, Robinson, and Munoz. We have the exact same back 4 who absolutely delivered for us this week. You got a midfield 4 looking better than mine, actually, with Gordon, Salah, Eze, and Palmer. See, look at this already. 2 Crystal Palace players. And then you got front 2 of Wood and Isak. So you benched João Pedro this week, which ended up being the right decision. We're yet to know if he might end up auto-subbing on for Cole Palmer. So talk us through your team, sort of how your season's gone and where you can foresee it sort of moving.
Yeah, so my only headache last weekend was Munoz v Pedro. Luckily, my Palace heart went with Munoz because I think my head would have gone with Pedro normally.
Yep.
But that was really good. It's going well. Like the defense, I can't really complain. Trent's finally got a double-digit haul because I was a bit worried about him over the last couple of weeks. But yeah, the midfield speaks for itself. Eze, 4 goal contributions in a row now in the last 4 weeks. So
he's starting to turn it on a little bit, isn't he?
Yeah, and the front 2 cannot complain at all. I know Isaac got 2 points this week, but can't score every week, sadly, and Southampton next week's a really nice fixture for him.
I'm terrified of Gordon against Southampton. I don't know why. I just feel like, we're going to discuss Southampton later because they have been woeful, but I feel like he's going to tear that Southampton defence to shreds.
Yeah, he had 2 shots cleared off the line, didn't he, against Bournemouth? So even though they weren't that great, he's still getting in them places and he is so rapid, he can turn it on.
I looked at that, the data for Gordon. We'll move on to the Newcastle game later, but I looked at the data for Gordon and was like, oh, he finally had a quiet game. Then I watched the highlights and it was 2 cleared shots off the line. And I was like, okay, maybe I got away with one there. So yeah, you're on 56 points. We'll talk about all of your players and especially, like I said, those Palace assets. But should be a nice, healthy green. I have an absolute stormer, which is nice because, like I said, 4 red arrows in a row. And it's nice that I get to actually be happy for an FPL Therapy episode for once. So this is positive therapy today. So I've still got Sanchez yet to play. I'm honestly not expecting much from Sanchez, but if he can get anything, that would be nice, especially with a lot of the other goalkeepers blanking. Exactly the same defense of Trent, Gabriel, Robinson, Munoz. My major decision was, do I bench Gabriel for Rodgers? So I was just like, do I back Arsenal or do I back Villa? Turns out they both got 1 point, so it didn't really matter too much. Only midfield 3, because I was in a 4-3-3 this week of Salah, Fernandes, and then Palmer. If Palmer misses out tonight, I get Enzo. If Palmer and Enzo miss out, I get Rodgers. So I'm not really too fussed what happens there. And then a front 3 of Isak, Wood, and Jean-Philippe Mateta.
Big man himself.
I love that man.
He's great.
What an awful penalty, which we'll discuss. Yeah. It really wasn't the best. But for him to get a brace when he's still 4% ownership at my rank, it's the really stuff of dreams. Yeah, and obviously Wood. just continues to be the best striker in the Premier League. I don't know what's happened to him. And the thing is, like, the assist was slightly fortunate. The goal was very well taken, but it's just like, it's relentless. And I remember have you owned Chris Wood all season, or is it more recently?
I think I've had him out for about 2 or 3 weeks max. So.
Okay, because I remember at the start of the season, he was my arch nemesis. Like, I was just like, how does this man keep returning?
Yeah.
I remember, like, I'm not overly emotional in response to FPL. I'm quite a calm guy, but I remember just writing the angriest tweet about Chris Wood earlier in the season. Like, this man just keeps twatting in 9-pointers. I'll try and pull it up and show you, but if not yet, it was just a very salty tweet because I just didn't understand how he kept scoring. And then I decided I'm just going to lean into it. I'm just going to lean into it and say, do you know what? He won't stop scoring, and he hasn't. And since I brought him in, he's now got, well, I've owned, I think, Mateta and Wood for 3 consecutive weeks now, and they each have returns in 3 consecutive weeks.
Yeah, they're doing well.
They've been brilliant. And one of the few things I've got right this season is the forwards, because we just moved off of Cunha, who did very well for us. The only forward that I got very wrong was Erling Haaland. But we've spoken enough about that throughout all of the episodes. Yeah, 56 for Luke, 67 for me. Let's see how Monday night goes. So it's just a classic FPL Therapy episode. If you've been watching recently, they've been a bit all over the place with reviews, previews, recording on different days. For the foreseeable future, we're back to Monday recordings, Tuesday morning uploads, and we're just going to review Game Week 22, but also look ahead to Game Week 23. And then remember, we've got not only the assistant manager chip available in 24, but also the Liverpool double as well. You're currently on 2 Liverpool as well. So maybe we'll discuss where we're looking for that third Liverpool asset. The first game was Newcastle 1, Bournemouth 4. What a one to start with. The early kickoff strikes again, the curse. What did you make of this? Did you manage to catch any of it, the highlights, and how good at Bournemouth?
Yeah, no, I saw most of it really. First 5-10 minutes from Bournemouth was amazing. I think that kind of showed you how that game was going to go. I think St. James's Park had a bit of complacency to it, fans as well as the players. And Bournemouth just thought, let's take it to them. And something I love about Bournemouth this season is they're a team who, when they get the ball, they want to pass it forward really quickly. Whereas other teams, mid-table teams who don't push on, they love passing it around the back. And it's not about possession-based football with Bournemouth. It's kind of rapid counter-attack. Let's see what we can do. Let's damage them when they're playing a high line against us. And it worked to a T. It was
very strange to say Newcastle losing 4-1 at home. I don't think that scoreline flatters Bournemouth.
No.
Like, it probably was a 3 or 4-1 kind of game. Newcastle had their chances. We spoke about, obviously, Gordon having 2 chances cleared off the line. You need a little bit of luck in there as well. But you know it's bad when Eddie Howe doesn't really give many excuses after the game. He's a manager that loves a good excuse, and he'll come out with something that he just said we weren't really at it. It wasn't a good performance. And when something coincides where the home team's not playing very well and the away team is absolutely at it, it's going to result in that. I found it incredible how much they limited Isak. So I don't know if you saw, he didn't have a shot till the 89th minute.
Yeah, it was crazy. Like, they just, every time they wanted to try and make something, Newcastle, you saw they had no options in front of them. They would just be impressed. They were being man-marked, and, you know, none of the players knew what to do.
Dean Howson is some player. Like, I know that obviously Senesi got injured and we said we've got this cheap asset, Howson. Until Senesi's back, you'll have to, there's no way Senesi gets that shirt back. He's been incredible.
Not till he's a chill guy, isn't he? He absolutely loves it. And
he is
19 years old, I think he is. Juve now are in the transfer window for a centre-back, and they're looking at Lloyd Kelly instead. It's like the biggest downgrade they might have done over the last 6 months.
Yeah, it's incredible. But he's going to be some player, and I mean he already is, but in the future you could see him taking the step up to like a Liverpool to replace Van Dijk or something like that. So let's see how he gets on. But he was the one that cleared both of Gordon's chances off the line as well. I wouldn't say he pocketed Isak, and also Zabani as well. Massive shout out to him. They're just reminds me of the Forest centre-back pairing of just like, they are really good centre-backs. But yeah, Isak didn't have a shot till the 89th minute. Gordon only had 1 shot before the 83rd minute. Obviously had a couple of late chances as well. Bournemouth now up to 6th in the table. The more insane thing for me is that they've done all of that with most of their players out injured. I mean, they've got a lot of their starting players, but 9 first-team injuries. You don't hear Iraola complaining about that in the presses. He's just getting that team done. Apparently, going into this game, it was actually only 11 senior players fit from the start of the season from their senior squad. So they are down to bare bones. And to go to St. James's Park and get a 4-1 victory is incredible, I think.
Yeah, it's really good. And again, that's credit to Iraola. It's like when they have these problems, they don't change their setup, but it still carries on working. And I think that just shows how good a coach he actually is. And these players are fighting for him, and it didn't matter who was on that pitch. They wanted that win.
So I don't think anyone's going to sit there and sell their Newcastle assets now off the back of 1 loss. The more interesting thing is, do you go out and buy them? Because Southampton is a fantastic entry point. Then it's Fulham. Then it's City, Forest, Liverpool. That's not an overly fantastic run. Then bear in mind that if they reach the EFL Cup final, which we would expect them to because they won 2-0 in the first semi-final leg, they blank in 29. So what you're looking at after the Southampton game is Fulham, City, Forest, Liverpool, West Ham, blank. it might be enough justification for me to avoid going for a Gordon right now? Or do you think they could score so many points in that time, such a great entry point? Would you still be interested in going out there and buying a Newcastle player?
It's really hard because, they don't have any other fixtures really apart from a semi-final in early Feb. So they're still they're not going to be rotated that much. But also, if you want to capitalize in FPL, if you want to push up, you kind of might need to think, oh, should I actually take out Gordon maybe in game week 24, use that double game week and then push on with other players instead of kind of hoping he maybe scores against teams that he's not expected to score as many points against. So yeah, I'm tempted. I've been looking at maybe taking them both out in the near future and just having a bit of fun with it. Maybe getting Mateta in if I wanted to say him a bit too many times, but
It's high risk, high reward. And again, no one's going to do that this week. I still don't mind going out there and buying them, but I feel like Isak would be the one that I would still buy regardless because he's just on such an incredible run. And I wouldn't worry too much about this one game. Gordon and Hall, I think you can look elsewhere. You've got Konate if you want a Liverpool defender for not much more than Lewis. So I think he's only 0.1 more. For Gordon, you've got Mbermo, who's now going into a nice run of fixtures. You've got Diaz if he looks like Jota could be out a little bit longer. So I wouldn't avoid Newcastle, but I definitely think you can look elsewhere. And we're now approaching a stage. Gordon and Hall were both above 50% effective ownership at most ranks. So it's almost a bet against the ownership. And especially I think if you're chasing, you've probably lost a lot of the points that they'll get. You wouldn't imagine that Gordon's going to blank in all of these games, but would you imagine he hauls in a lot of them? It's probably quite unlikely. The real thing that I want to discuss on Newcastle before we move on to the Bournemouth assets who are looking very enticing is Isak captaincy. So I'm going to read out some stats to you and then I want to know, do you think Isak is a genuine captaincy option above Salah against Ipswich at home or is it overthinking? So Southampton have conceded 19 goals in 5 games at home. That's at home. So 19 goals in the last 5 home games. In that time, they've averaged 3.46 expected goals conceded, which by the way is a ridiculous number. And they've conceded 38 big chances in 5 games. Wissa, who's obviously the striker for Brentford in the 5-0 win, he had 5 big chances in that game and created a big chance. So 6 big chance involvements for the striker for Brentford. Isak's going to get so many chances in this game. Is he a captaincy option instead of Salah? Or do you just think it's massively overthinking Salah against a relegation team at home?
It is so hard, isn't it? I came in here before them stats thinking Salah fully confident, but you have changed my mind a little bit. But I think, Salah at home to Ipswich. Champions League could take into account this week. So if something happens there, maybe you could think Isak. But at the moment, I know Salah's had 2 blanks, but realistically, is he going to have 3 blanks in a row? I can't see it, especially against an Ipswich side who have just shipped 6 goals to Man City. So for me, it's still on Salah, but Isak's a really interesting differential one, I think.
I certainly think if you're really chasing, let's say you're just really not happy with your rank, or if you're really interested in mini leagues and you know that your mini league leader just loves Salah, or the person chasing you is going to captain Salah, I think if there is a desire to differentiate for whatever reason, I mean, I might even do it and I don't really need to differentiate desperately, but I've just got to... Forwards against Southampton just seem to get a lot of chances. And I think Isak could be comfortably involved in 6-7 big chances in this game, and I wouldn't be massively surprised. Let us know in the comments if you're considering Isak captaincy, but I think it's at least worth a discussion. So moving on to Bournemouth, 3 really good cheap midfield assets. So we've got Ouattara, Kluivert, Semenyo. They were all exceptional in this. And the reason that Ouattara is suddenly starting as the 9 is obviously Unal and Ivan Nilsson are both out long term. So it looks very, very likely that they will continue as 3 of the starting 4 players. I think Brooks has been quite good recently as well. But I think Ouattara, Kluivert, Semenyo, they're all really cheap, right? Yeah. All below 6 million. Ouattara is only 5 million. They've got to have some consideration for us. Are you looking at any Bournemouth assets coming up? Have you owned any Bournemouth assets throughout the season?
I don't think I have. Maybe 1 week with Semenyo and then he didn't do anything, so I took him straight out.
So you're not someone that had to hold on to Semenyo for weeks, disappointed?
No,
okay.
So it's really interesting with them because, as you said, they're so low priced and Bournemouth definitely won't be going in for a striker now that they're still firing. 4 goals away to Newcastle. You do not need another signing. So players like Semenyo, they're guaranteed minutes for you. So they're definitely really good punts and their fixtures coming up. And even the next couple of fixtures, why couldn't Bournemouth get goals in them games, because they're scoring against everyone.
It's difficult because what I would say in an ideal world, they're facing Forest and Liverpool, who are 2 of the best 3 defences in the league. They're both at home, though. I think in an ideal world, what you say is you assess over the next 2 weeks, does Kluivert continue to look good? How many minutes does Ouattara get? And then you get a bit more information. But if this week you need to bring in a cheap asset, is it worth going for someone else for a couple of weeks and then moving to a Bournemouth asset? Or do you just pick the long-term player? Because the other thing about Bournemouth is they'll play in blank game week 29 and it's against Brentford at home, which is a good fixture. So what you get after Forest and Liverpool is Southampton, Wolves, Brighton, Spurs, Brentford at home. It's a nice little run of fixtures. The only difficult one there on paper would be Spurs Spurs or Brighton away, but you fancy them to get goals there. So I would almost say it could be worth it, especially if next week against Liverpool, you could rotate them. I also think as good as Forest have been, they do still concede chances. Southampton grabbed a couple against them. So I like it. All season, I've been saying Semenyo's a better option than Kluivert because Kluivert is a penalty merchant. That's what I've been saying. And Semenyo's data has been much better. 0 penalties in this hat-trick and an assist. Took every goal like his dad.
Really
like a proper striker in those positions.
Was it the hat-trick goal?
Yeah.
The third one outside the box. Like,
all 3 of them were like lower than 0.2 XG chances. They were just, he's a lovely ball striker as well. You know, someone that just, when they kick a football, it looks natural. Yeah. And he's playing as the 10 in behind Ouattara. You've got Semenyo off the left. So I think right now, I have to say Kluivert because of the run of form, the fact that his minutes have gone up because of the injury to Ivan Nilsson and Nuno and because of the penalties. But in 8 weeks, if you're looking really long term, I just know that Semenyo is still getting 80 to 90 minutes. And I don't know that about Kluivert. Even Nilsson's injury wasn't season ending. If he comes back in like March time, and this is a long time in the future, early March, could he take minutes off Kluivert? Maybe. But if he continues like this, I doubt it. It's probably Ouattara who's the long-term risk, but he's the cheapest at 5. If you had to buy one right now, which way do you think you'd lean?
I'd definitely be going Semenyo. There's the reasons he's a little bit more money, you know, he's guaranteed more minutes, and Kluivert isn't going to score a hat-trick every week. He is a really good player, but I just feel like Semenyo gives you a bit more in terms of assists or goals as well. So for me at the moment, it's definitely Semenyo, but, you know, Kluivert is just as good a punt at the moment as well.
I was just checking the data whilst you were talking there. So 0.33 XGI for Kluivert for his 4 attacking returns. Semenyo had 0.39 in that game. Now, data isn't everything. I truly do believe Kluivert strikes the ball significantly better than Semenyo. And I think he'll probably overperform his XG, or at least more so than Semenyo. But Semenyo should have had more in that game. There was one chance he blazed over the bar inside the first few minutes. If he takes one more chance and gets a goal and an assist again, I think there's a whole different conversation. So I think it's fairly close. I'm an absolute sucker for a penalty taker. Yeah. So I would just about lean towards Kluivert, but I think they're both very, very good. I do just want to give one final shout out to Ouattara just because of the price. So like I've got Enzo Fernandez in my team at like 4.8, 4.9. If I decide I want to move away from him and I can't get up all the way to a 5.5, he's a possible option. He actually was starting games even before the Unai and Ivan Nilsson injury. So we've got 6 of the last 7 he started, a few 90 minutes in there.
It's a good option, definitely, for sure. And, you know, when you're getting a player around that price range, you're not expecting them to bag every week. You have to accept their minutes risks or point risks, but they're a bit of a punt and they could do really well for you and pull you up the ranks.
I'm glad you've said that. We always have to lower our expectations around these cheap midfielders. I myself, I'm really frustrated that Enzo's not returned. I'm like, bloody hell, he's only 5 million. Like, what more can you? I think we had Cole Palmer last season. We were like a little bit blessed by how well he returned. Cool. Perfect. So, yeah, basically, I think Bournemouth are exceptional. I wouldn't stress about Newcastle. Great fixture this week, and I think Isak captaincy deserves some discussion. The next game, this looks like it was a relatively easy game when you look at the score. Brentford 0, Liverpool 2. Liverpool dominated the game, but it got close towards the end. Yeah. I love the narrative. I was watching Match of the Day, and I think it was Danny Murphy was like, this is why Liverpool are probably going to win the league. This is why they're the best team in the world at the moment. And I'm like, it was 0-0 until right at the end. Like, they don't score those 2 goals. And obviously, the ifs, buts, and maybes, then there'd be a whole different narrative here. It was relentless. Again, I saw a stat on Match of the Day. Liverpool had 37 shots in the game, which was the most ever for an away team in the Premier League since Opta records began in 2003. So 37 shots. What I found interesting is they only had, and I say only, 3.43 XG and only 4 big chances. So only 4 of those 37 shots were big chances. And in other games this season, they've accumulated over 6 XG, which tells me Brentford did an okay job of limiting them from those really massive chances. And when you watched, there was a few little half chances for Salah and Diaz and Gakpo, but I didn't feel at any point that Brentford were massively threatened with those clear-cut opportunities, but it was relentless. It was wave after wave after wave. The alternative is they were still a little bit susceptible to the counters. Worcester had another big chance.
Yeah, for sure. It's really interesting with Liverpool at the moment because I think the way they do get their points these last few weeks feels a bit like, you know, when champions win points. It's not like they're doing great. They're grinding out the points.
Yeah, I agree.
And that's what's happening with Liverpool. And to be fair, was it the first goal? It's Trent tried to cross it in and then it's rebounded to Trent, who's then crossed it in. So you get that little bit of luck. So it could have been completely different. But then again, Salah slotted in. Gakpo should have got some points there. Gakpo didn't even hit the target, you know. Yep. So there's definitely moments. And yeah, Brentford easily could have scored if they had their goal scoring boots on that day.
Yeah, I love watching Brentford play. Really even in a 2-0 loss, it was just still an interesting, exciting game because of the way Brentford play. And I love my attackers going up against Brentford. I mean, we'll discuss, obviously, certain Jean-Philippe. But I just think it's a game where I'm always like, all my attackers could get something because they just play exciting football. So the reason I want to really focus on Liverpool now is obviously they've got the double game week in 24. We know we probably want them. They've got Bournemouth and Everton away. It's not a perfect double. But the reason I think they are so good is this week they play Ipswich at home, and in 25 they play Wolves at home. So in 3 weeks, what you're getting is Ipswich at home, Bournemouth away, Everton away, Wolves at home. I talk about entry points in FPL a lot. Whilst the double is what you really want them for, you would argue that the Ipswich game is better than the double, right? It's the real banker of a fixture. So I think it makes a lot of sense to buy a Liverpool asset this week if you're going to own them for the double. The only concern you've got is, I'll just bring up their fixtures here. They've got Lille, Ipswich, PSV, then Bournemouth. Then in between Bournemouth and Everton, they've got Spurs, Plymouth, and then Everton. So before the Everton game, which is only in game week 24, they've got 6 other games. So trying to nail exactly which Liverpool assets are going to be nailed at that point, if you're going for a slight rotation risk, is tricky. And so then I come back to the idea, yes, Ipswich at home is the entry point, but is there some justification to waiting a week to get a little bit more information, especially if you're going for an attacker? How are you feeling right now in terms of buying Liverpool?
I would love to get another Liverpool attacker in right now. Nunes scoring last weekend kind of doesn't help because in the back of your head, you're thinking, oh, maybe he's going to start now because he got a couple and Gakpo didn't. But then also Champions League, they're kind of done with that. You could say they rotate more in the Champions League against Lille. The cup game actually, is that against Spurs they got coming up?
Yeah, so they have to overturn. So that one, they're going to have to go full strength, you'd imagine.
Yeah, so they'd have to go full strength. So it is really interesting. But they also had a run like this, I think over December, where they had like Real Madrid and all that as well. And they were just still battling through, kind of sticking most of the time to their normal starting 11, but giving players less minutes. Maybe the 60 to 70 mark, you'd see them coming off. So I think if you really want to, you've got to be attacking Ipswich. If you can get the funds in for maybe just Gakpo or a Konate, you can't really trust the rest at the moment. So obviously don't take the risk if it's like a Diaz or a Nunes. But if it is Gakpo you want in, I'd say just go for it, give it a go.
Yeah, what you said there's, I think, quite true. Like, there's a lot of games, but assuming that he goes full strength in the games they really need to win and then the opposite in the others, the rest's okay. So it's Tuesday to Saturday is the Lille to Ipswich break. That's pretty decent. Then it's Saturday to Wednesday. So they don't play PSV on the Tuesday. It's the Wednesday. That's, again, an okay break. And you'd imagine they can rotate in the Champions League. They've done so well to this point. All they have to do is get top 8. You'd imagine they do. Then it's Bournemouth on the Saturday. Then they've got a 5-day break till the Spurs game. Then obviously a couple of days till Plymouth, but they're not going full strength against Plymouth. Yeah. And then there's a further 3 days until the Everton game. So as long as they can rest in against Lille, PSV and Plymouth, you'd expect the main assets to start the Premier League games and the Spurs game. So I don't think I'd be worrying too much about rotation. It's more so like injuries and just like people like Konate, people like Jota. They've got such bad injury records already that you worry with all of these games coming up. So if I was to push you right now, taking into account everything, pricing, structures, let's say that most people have Salah and Trent, and if you don't, they're probably the top 2 assets. How would you rank kind of the third Liverpool asset going into these few fixtures?
For me at the moment, it is literally just Gakpo.
Gakpo.
For me, Liverpool aren't getting too many clean sheets at the moment. Yeah, they got one against Brentford, but before that, they were looking a bit leaky. So I'm not as set on a Konate because that's kind of all he's going to bring you. Gakpo gives you a bit of goals, assists, and Jota you can't trust. Nunes minutes you can't trust because I feel like Liverpool fans were kind of slating him a bit before this game. Like, he wasn't doing great. He was missing a lot of chances. Chiesa, you can't trust. He probably play against Lille. He'll probably get the starts against Lille and Plymouth, so that's actually quite helpful for us.
Yep.
So for me, it is literally just go Gakpo. I guess you could argue Alisson as well, but he's a bit of a premium goalie, and do you really need him when there's other better options out there at the moment? So Gakpo for me all the way.
It feels very uninspiring going for Alisson, Konate, Van Dijk, because Van Dijk's even lost a lot of the attacking threat he used to have. Like, I speak about this a lot, but he doesn't really even get on the end of corners that often these days. Doesn't score that many goals. Robertson, obviously, you can't really go for with Tsimikas getting game time. They're still looking at left backs as well. It's all a bit boring. Even Gakpo, though. I'm just going to look up for his returns on the site because it feels very much like Gakpo never really goes big, but maybe, okay, he's got 1 double-digit return this season. Yeah, it's just like the odd return here and there. In fact, the last 1, 2, 3, on 3 or 4 occasions, he's got an attacking return and no bonus as well. So that's Solanke. And that's often because he gets the early sub. But also, if Liverpool are scoring 6 goals or 5 goals or 4 goals and Gakpo's getting 1, the bonus isn't there to go with it. I just have this feeling about Gakpo. Yeah, he'll probably get you a 6 and a 7, and he could go and get you a little bit more, but even that's quite uninspiring. But it feels so silly to not attack the double and get a third Liverpool player.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because I feel like we had this issue more with Pep over the last few years. The rotation meant the doubles with City weren't as worth it. Even like a De Bruyne, sometimes you couldn't rely on. You just literally had to go for Haaland. Maybe it's a little bit the same as that. Do you need more than Trent and Salah? Could you maybe attack the Everton assets with them getting the win under David Moyes recently? Could you maybe go for them a little bit more in their double instead because they're more reliable?
There have been so many times in the past where we've done this, where we ignored doubles and it's gone quite well. Like Mbeumo's got Spurs.
Yeah.
Could Mbeumo against Spurs outscore Diaz with Bournemouth and Everton?
Easily.
Easily. Or even just bring in John-Philippe Mateta rather than Gakpo because he'll probably score 14 goals. So you've got the options there that you can ignore the doubles. You don't have to attack it. You mentioned Alisson. At the moment, I could literally die of boredom, but that's what my plan is right now. But that's because I have Sanchez in goal, who this week has City. So I'm thinking for my team, doing Sanchez to Alisson gives me a much better fixture this week. And then next week, I wouldn't have minded having Sanchez, but it's a double, then it's Wolves. And Sanchez hasn't been particularly consistent this season. But if I was sat there with a Raya in net, or for you got Pickford, there's no need to go for an Alisson. So I think it's very team dependent. I think if you're sat there with João Pedro money in the bank, I'd probably go Gakpo. If you're sat there with a really weak midfield and you don't like any of them, maybe you take a punt on Diaz. Or if you're sat there with a defender that's gone into a difficult fixture run, then absolutely you could consider going for Konate. But I don't think it's sort of one size fits all. I think it really does depend.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And I think actually you've seen some people on social media doing really, really well when they're attacking differentials. Saka for Foden is the literal example that's happened over the last 4 weeks, you know? So there definitely are really good punts out there that aren't involved in that double that you could easily see get the same amount of points as you said.
Just a question on Jota. No one's buying Jota right now.
No.
He's actually only started, the last time he started a league game was game week 7, which is ridiculous. Like I thought he'd started since then. I don't even know that he starts 2 of the next 3. No. Could start 1 of the next 3. Could genuinely start 0 of the next 3. That's assuming that he gets over whatever this niggle is. Do you sell Jota? I had a couple of questions of people that own Jota going into Ipswich double Wolves. Can you sell him? Should you sell him?
I guess they've been waiting for this whole time. I guess if they've had him for a few weeks, they've been like, they can bench him and maybe have him for the double. But now he's even more unreliable. I guess, I don't know. That's such a hard one. I'd probably sell him. I quite like selling them if there is literally no guarantee of a start in the double, which there isn't at the moment. Yes, he could do well for you, but realistically, is that going to hurt your rank that much? No.
Yep.
So you could take more of that risk with him. And if you really wanted a Liverpool one, go for like a Diaz in midfield, I guess. But it just feels like he's too much of a risk. And when you've got so many decent midfielders around that price range, there's no point of having him.
Yeah. So Mbeumo will have 3 fixtures in the next 3. Jota's got 4 in the next 3. Jota's not starting more than 2 of them. Yeah. So Mbeumo's probably got more fixtures and he's on penalty. So I think I'd do something like Jota to Mbeumo. And actually on Mbeumo, I thought he was very, very good in this game. He was really, really involved. And what I like from Mbeumo is we went through that spell, do you remember, where he wasn't shooting and everyone sold him. He's shooting again. Yeah. And he's very, very involved. He was taking every set piece, in swinging, out swinging, free kicks, corners. He's obviously on penalties, 90 minutes every game. He's back to that asset, you know, where we say, what more do you want from a player? And I like that. And now Brentford are going into that really nice run of fixtures. They've got Palace, Spurs, West Ham, Leicester, Everton, Villa. Lots of those at home as well. Spurs, Everton and Villa, the home games. It's a nice run there. I really, really, really want a Brentford asset. It's just how do I get Mbeumo in my team? And I love my front 3, so I can't get to Wissa. Where are you feeling right now for the Brentford assets?
Well, yeah, I think Mbeumo's the way. Wissa is also a really good player as well to pick. It's just Mbeumo, you don't get a lot these days in modern football, I want to say, where you've got a player who's actually taken every set piece and penalties. Palace, for example, it's like Eze and Hughes are deciding like the second they take the corner who's taking it. But Brentford, as you say, he's taking all of them. You don't get that. That's such a good thing to have. He also sometimes will get that added clean sheet point as well. And he's going to be heavily involved. So for me, it's going to be Mbeumo. But a lot of people will be maybe considering Wissa for João Pedro, I guess.
I'll ask you this question then. If you are looking for a midfielder below 8 million right now, do you go Gordon, Mbeumo, Diaz? Do you go a little bit cheaper for an Eze? Like, where would you go right now if someone's at that price?
I try not to be biased, so I won't say Eze. But it is probably Mbeumo. Like, I'm sure he's got like 13 goals this season in 22 appearances.
It's crazy the way that he just sort of like, it feels like he ticks along and then he gets so many years. So he's got 13 goals, 3 assists, 16 attacking returns in 22 games.
And that is in a Brentford side who, yes, do attack, but they also do care about their defence as well. And of course, they had so many home games at the start of the season where the opposition was a bit easier for them and they were just literally battering them. And that's not going to happen every week. But Mbuemo's proven that he can be a consistent goal scorer for him, and he's on penalties. So he's the perfect one in that price range. I don't see anyone else you really want to get.
Yeah, and I like that he plays in blank game week 29. It's, of course, against Bournemouth, which isn't an easy game. But when we are starting to think ahead to game week 29, if you decide not to free hit and save the free hit, or if you've already used it, you do want to start bringing in assets wherever possible that aren't blanking. It looks very likely, again, if Newcastle reach the final, that both Eze and Gordon will blank in 29. So you're giving yourself an extra fixture. So yeah, I really like Brentford assets, and Burma and Wissa very much in my thinking. I'm probably looking next week at that Spurs game as the entry point, because I think Crystal Palace, with the way they're playing, it's not necessarily the easiest fixture to target.
Yeah.
Cool. Leicester 0, Fulham 2. This was relatively dominant from Fulham. It was sort of just like an okay routine victory. Obviously, getting a clean sheet, which has been quite rare for Fulham, considering that when we keep they're sixth for expected goals conceded, but they don't keep clean sheets. They've managed to do it. I love Ruud van Nistelrooy, as you can imagine, as a United fan. I really want him to succeed. It's not looking good. They've not really improved under Ruud. There are some signs of he's trying to get them playing, but sometimes that leads to them conceding more chances. Leicester and Southampton and Ipswich is so... I really don't want the newly promoted sides to keep being so rubbish, but the way that the system is structured, it's very difficult to come up and stay up. So it looks like they're the three teams that will go down at the moment.
Yeah, at the moment, and it is so interesting. I do think Ipswich, you've got to accept that even though they spent so much, I see a lot of people saying they spent 100, 150 mil. They were a League One team 2 years ago, so they're not going to have, even if they spend that much, they're still not going to have a squad that's like up their mid-table Premier League quality yet. Leicester, 7 losses in a row in the Premier League now for them. Yes, they beat QPR 6-2, but that is an awful tally. And to be honest, I do think part of that is down to the ownership as well, because you've had these PSR issues for them that they've been flirting with as well. If they get relegated, I think they've got a 3-point deduction coming their way from the EFL. Wow. So, it is an issue there. And they've decided Steve Cooper was playing poor football, defensive football. And to be honest, some of his tactics mid-game were appalling. I remember they were 2-0 up against us. He brings on Connor Cody because he's worried Connor Cody gives away the penalty in the 96th minute to make it 2-2. So he has made some big mistakes. So I can see why they sacked him. It's just the way football is now. The type of defensive manager is dying a little bit. I know Nuno's doing really well, but these owners are looking for that, and they've taken a risk with Ruud, but it's a huge job. A lot of that team aren't, they're still relying on Jamie Vardy, and his stats lately haven't been good. He's not converting anymore. So what else are they going to do? And then Southampton are just Southampton. I didn't want to say too much of them because fair play to their fans. Like, they're selling out each week still in the away ends, which is amazing to see, but there's been barely any change apart from them maybe getting a few more goals. So yeah, I think the three are going down.
It's a difficult job. Like, getting a new manager doesn't just fix the existing problems. And for a lot of these clubs, we'll talk about Man United later, it's not a managerial problem. The players are just terrible. And at some point, you look at the Leicester and Southampton squads and just think, they're not Premier League side, especially Southampton, but we'll move on to them. Sadly for Iwobi owners, off the back of his 15 points, he was subbed off at half time. I will just say, please, if you've still not gone and watched those bloody goals for Iwobi, they were just 2 crosses that Robinson passed it sideways, Iwobi crossed the ball, no one touched the ball, and then they just trickled into the net. So I know he's just got a brace. Neither of them were actually registered as shots because they weren't shots, they were crosses. I'd be happy selling Iwobi right now. There are lots of really good cheap midfielders. They've got United, Newcastle, Forest, Palace in the next 4. 3 of them at home. United's not a bad fixture, but Forest and Newcastle are. Palace, with the way they're defending, 2 clean sheets in a row. I don't like those 4. And Iwobi's just not got much about him from an FPL perspective. So I would be happy selling Iwobi. Robinson and Castagna continue to look pretty good, though. Robinson's 8 points was wonderful. Obviously, you have Robinson as well.
Yeah, really good. No complaints. Benched him for them 2 assists, which...
So did I. I've done that twice now. I benched him for his 2 assists earlier in the season. When was that? Against Liverpool?
At Anfield, wasn't it? And you just got to accept it sometimes. Like, as you said, they were 2 crosses. Iwobi actually nearly did that again against Leicester. No one wanted to take him on, so he just decided to kind of cross-shoot and hit the crossbar, I think. Wow. So maybe that's his little trait he's going to try from now on. So we'll see. But yeah, Robinson's a great asset. Really good. He's probably like a left-back that clubs like Liverpool should be looking at in the summer.
Yeah, I'll be really interested to see what left-back Liverpool go after because you've got Kirkes, who looks good. We should have probably spoke about Kirkes' goal was exceptional as well. Robinson looking really good. You've even got people like Leif Davis, who, if Ipswich go down, you can probably get at a cheap price as well. there are lots of really solid left backs in the Premier League that I could see him going for. I won't say Mitchell because obviously I think that'll break your heart. But I can imagine that they probably will stay Premier League based. And I think they've got a few good options there. What I like about Robinson in comparison to Castagna is his baseline bonus is a little bit higher. It's about 1.5 points on average, which doesn't sound like a lot. But when there's a clean sheet and defenders get bonus points, they're normally separated by like 1 in the bonus point system. So that is a relatively big jump. And it's probably one of the reasons why, as well as he's obviously increased creativity, he might still be worth the extra money on Castagna, but I would still go for Castagna. This is more of a footballing point, but I think Fulham's clean sheet potential might shoot up soon. Sanderberg and Lukic are playing so incredibly well at the moment. There are a real absence of good CDMs in the Premier League, I would say. Like every club I look at, I'm like, oh, you could probably do with a slightly better or more squad depth. But Sanderberg and Lukic, they've just got a really nice balance between the pair of them. And I think Sanderberg in particular, when he was out, they lose a little bit of what makes them so good. And so I just think that I just think Fulham are such a good side. I tweeted at the start of the season with the players they've got, as long as they don't miss Paulinho too much, which they're not right now, I think they've comfortably finished top half of the table for me.
Yeah, they can do really well. And I was worried for them before they kind of started going into that transfer window. I was a bit like, wow, they're kind of not really going for it. They've lost Paulinho, but they've replaced him really well. And what they like to do, maybe you could say they spent quite a lot on Smith Rowe and that, but Sanderberg was a bit of a bargain. So they're looking really good. They could definitely challenge top half. And that's why the Premier League is so good this season, because sadly, or for some, sadly, Manchester United are in the bottom half, whereas like the Fulhams and the Bournemouths are battling in the top half. So for the other 14 Premier League clubs, it's a season that they're all attacking, and it's beautiful to see.
There are like 15 or 16 of the teams in the Premier League. It's difficult to beat them. And it makes for a really exciting season. It reminds me of the F1 season that we've just had, where it's like anyone can win the Grand Prix. I kind of like, that was what makes sport good. No one wants dominance. That's why I don't watch the Bundesliga in the past and like Ligue 1, because it's like PSG or Bayern Munich are playing, they win every game. So yeah, I like it a lot. Just on Jimenez, every week I seem to change my opinion on this man. I was like, oh, I don't want him. He's a minute's risk. Menez is there waiting. Then he gets consecutive starts again and again and again, shows he's on penalties, looks really good. And I'm like, actually, I think Jimenez is a great buy. Then he blanks against Leicester and comes off in the 71st minute. How do you feel about Jimenez?
I've never gone for him, never will, but he was a good option for Ipswich. There was no line about it. He was playing well, and it's just one of them ones, Leicester, but it's just one of them ones where, it just happens, and then you're looking at Man United next. He could score easy, and he has scored a few against the bigger teams, hasn't he? I think he scored against Arsenal earlier this season. So I guess you'd give him that other fixture, because there is no point at the moment kind of not playing against Man United. Pick them players against Man United, because they will leak goals at the moment.
It was going to be my advice, was he's got Newcastle in 24. So I would probably hold him for Man United, see how he gets on, see what his minutes are like, and then assess after that. Just one more note on Fulham. If Spurs reach the EFL Cup final, and that is a big if based on the way they're playing right now, but obviously they've got a 1-0 lead going into the second leg, then Fulham and Spurs will both blank in Game Week 29. We are expecting the blanks in 29 to go into Game Week 33 to create a double. However, because of Spurs' progression in the UEFA Conference League, UEFA Europa League, the Europa League, I think. I can't remember which one they're in yet. In the Europa League.
In the Europa League, yeah.
Then as a result, it might not be able to go into Game Week 33. So the possibility is that the Premier League might provisionally announce a double in Game Week 25 for Fulham and Spurs if Spurs reach the final. So it will be like if Spurs reach the final, then this fixture will go into this time. And if that happens, then they'll confirm it. So what we're saying is there is a good chance if Spurs reach the final that Fulham have a double game week in 25.
Wow.
So it would be further reason to hold on to him, and there's further reason to hold on to Robinson, Castagna, and not sell them. I know I just said sell Iwobi. I'd still probably be tempted to sell Iwobi. So what the double would be for Fulham, and this is a lot of ifs, buts, and maybes, it would be Spurs at home and Forest at home. And then for Spurs, it would be United at home and Fulham away. So maybe there's some justification to just hold your Fulham assets a little bit longer.
Yeah, well, I think Robinson's just set and forget really at the moment anyway. So that, and at the moment, Jimenez is kind of one of the decent ones around that price range. So you have got a few weeks where you could just leave it and then assess after that.
I was looking at maybe Robinson to Konate, but as much as I do want another Liverpool player, Robinson's been great. And that additional fact of there could be a double coming has just been enough to, I think, put me off that as an option. Right, here's your chance. West Ham 0, Palace 2. I'll just talk about whatever you want. Talk about Palace. What I want to know is from a fan perspective, how have you been performing recently? Attack, defense, the way the team's setting up. Is it quite a positive vibe about Palace at the moment?
Yeah, for sure. And I won't dive too much into the start of the season, but the question was, why didn't Palace perform at the start? And for me, the obvious answer was the fact that 6 of our players played in international finals, and then they came back 10 days before the season started. Mateta played at the Olympics, and so he literally was back 3 days before that Brentford game. And then we literally sold Anderson, Ayew and Elise, and we didn't replace them till deadline day. So we literally had like a mix-in team under a manager who needs a few weeks to get teams back to their fitness.
Yep.
So it was kind of, although you kind of go into the season excited, you're a bit like, oh, everyone's looking a bit off it. So you could see it coming. It was just like, when were we going to get that win? But thank God for Spurs being Charity FC this season because they gave us that 1-0 win. And since then, I think it's 3 losses in 17 matches in all competitions.
Wow, I didn't know
That's
that.
2 losses against Arsenal in that week where Jesus decided to just completely tear us apart.
So that's 1 loss in 15 outside of those 2 games.
Yeah, and that has been against Fulham in November when we literally had to play Mark Gay as the CDM alongside an academy player. And we had kind of like Bournemouth this week, all kind of like academy players on the bench. And it was just a mess because we had so many injuries at that time. I think Eze was out as well. So, now Glasner's got his team again. And this is all without Adam Wharton, who loves a pass forward. So at the moment, I think we're a bit slow. We're not doing that pass forward as quick as I'd like. But when he comes back in the team, absolutely buzzing. And, we're getting a bit of depth now. We signed this Romain Esse, who I'm very excited about. We're apparently getting a left wing back for cover for Mitchell. So it's a good vibe. It feels a little bit like the end of last season.
I thought that, yeah.
Just a few more draws at the moment. But, that's going to happen, I think, when you kind of have downgraded a little bit, but with Elise, but how are we going to replace him with the exact same quality? He's just world class.
Scary footballer, Elise, isn't he?
It's just amazing that we had him at our club, to be honest.
Yeah, I know. So let's get onto FPL then. So it's nice to. I didn't actually know that stat about how many games you've gone without losing, or only 3 losses in that period is pretty impressive. Yeah, you turn a couple of those draws into wins, and you're even further up the table. The first player I want to discuss is Sarr. Became the bandwagon in FPL, and rightly so. He had a good few returns. His data's been looking good. His minutes have been exceptional. Blanking consecutively, not many returns. Then he's gone into this game with a small hamstring issue, which has meant probably the reason he's only got 68 minutes. And it was probably his worst FPL performance in a while. So we had 0 shots and 0 chances created. His total data was 0.01 XA, and then that was it.
Yeah.
Should owners feel a little bit unlucky not to have got more? How do you feel about holding Sarr? How do you see his minutes progressing over the future? Do you still think he's a good hold?
Yeah, so I was at that away day, so it was a good one. So I could properly, give an assessment on him, and you could tell he was injured. He was appalling. Yeah. So there was that. But he is cheap, so again, the issues aren't there. Eze has just proven to be a more consistent FPL player, even when Sarr was at Watford. Sarr's points kind of came a bit like in a run where he was explosive. So that's my worry about Sarr. He's really good for us. He's a good player. But at the end of the day, can he consistently bag goals for us? No, I don't think that's what he's in the team for. That's what you got your Matetas for and your creator in Eze. Also, this Romain Esse coming. He's only 19, so his minutes won't be like completely taken Sarr off. But you're thinking Glasner's already taken Eze off in like the 60th, 70th. If this Esse comes into the squad, Sarr's minutes are going to be limited as well again. So it is a tricky one. Again, it's that one with that price range. You kind of don't expect too much, but he's great. Fixtures are good at the moment, but why wouldn't you get a Mateta and Eze? They're just so much more reliable if you can get them, obviously, or move over to Qatar from a Bournemouth or something, give it a punt, because I think at that price range you can.
Do you think you give him one more game against Brentford? It's the sort of game where if he is fit and he can stretch his legs, then he'll run right, you'd imagine, against Brentford with that space.
Yeah, you'd see so. But we'll see how it goes. He obviously got 68 minutes, so it can't have been too much of an injury. You know what I mean? So he should be fine. Glasner's very open in press conferences, so you don't have to worry about that if you're holding Sarr and waiting. Glasner will tell us if they're able to play or not, so at least you've got that. And yeah, just see how it goes, because Brentford aren't great away from home. I think that Southampton game was their only win this season.
Yeah. I was just looking what you said about Sarr. He's actually only returned in 5 games this season.
Yeah.
And so in the last 10, he's blanked in 8 of them. No, sorry, 7 of them. So yeah, you got the 17, 7 and 6. If you look at there's a lot of sort of 2 and 3 points, and obviously he wasn't starting at the beginning of the season, but lots of 90 minutes before that injury. So I would just keep in mind that as of right now, we think he's nailed, but yeah, maybe with new signing and also the potential injury, minutes might drop a little bit.
Yeah, Nketiah could replace him as well at the moment, because even though that's not his position, Palace for some reason decided we needed a right 10 and got Nketiah, even though I do like Nketiah. So he could come in some games. Glasner isn't scared to rotate, as I said. So it is a bit of a worry, and I think there are more reliable players around that price range.
Okay, cool. So we think Eze's a great shout as well. Eze's in like a tricky price point almost. He's more than those sort of cheaper assets, Rodgers, Sarr, etc. But then he's quite a bit cheaper than if you want to go to like a Gordon or a Bruno Fernandes. So like if you've got that price point, great. Right, this is the moment then. So kick back and we're going to speak for the next hour about Jean-Philippe Mateta. I would just say that I love him. I free hitting double GAMEWEEK 34 last season. We got the 29 points. I owned him for the back end of last season. As with Eze, by the way, who I brought in GAMEWEEK 38 for his 18 pointer. I'm basically a Crystal Palace fan at this point. So talk to me about Mateta though, because he's got 4 goals in 3 games. And he scored a penalty, although Eze wasn't on the pitch, but we probably think he's first choice penalty taker. All I have to do is type in Mateta on Twitter and scroll through Crystal Palace accounts. And I've never seen a team and fans worship a player like they do. So talk to me about Mateta.
Yeah, probably 90% of my tweets are about Mateta these days. He is just a personality off the pitch I just want to talk about first. I've never had anything like it. He's just shouting fantastique when he's finishing games, kicking every corner flag he can.
Yeah.
And he's literally got the best chant in the league. I mean, how can you not enjoy Wenger boys? It must be so frustrating for away fans or home fans who are against Mateta when they just hear Palace fans break into Wenger boys. But for us, it's absolutely brilliant. And he's delivered. He was rubbish for 2.5 seasons, but now we've got a manager who actually wants to win every game and who wants to focus on goals. We're seeing him flourish. I think he's only like 26 as well, even though he might look a bit older. So he's got a few years in him. FPL-wise, he takes a lot of his chances. Like, I think earlier in the season, he missed a fair few big chances, but I think the Olympics played into that. Like, he didn't have a pre-season. Now he's kind of fully fit. He's doing so well. And I think what's so good about him as well, in terms of like FPL, is I want to say 3 or 4 of his last 6 goals have been with his weak foot.
Okay.
So he's got finishing both feet. And I mean, I don't know if you saw, but he absolutely sent Mavropanos to the shops. He did step overs, nutmegged him.
I've got here, he drew both fouls, which led to the red card. So he literally was single-handedly responsible for that red card.
It was ridiculous. The way he plays on the ball, and that's why I think he's really good as well. And this is why I say when Wharton's back in the team, I think Mateta's going to be even better, because that pass forward, Wharton always wants to play it as quick as possible. And the goal that Mateta got from open play against West Ham, literally when he gets slotted in behind, when he's 1v1 a defender, he does do really well. So really good asset, decent price range, probably on pens, I'd say, even though that one against Fabianski was awful.
It was an awful pen, yeah.
From where I was, I thought he missed it, but is what it is. He normally takes much better pens, so he's a really good asset, and you're looking at forwards around that price range, he's really good for it.
I'll give him a little bit of leeway with the penalty. All I will say is he'd run so much in that game. And for the penalty, when he stood Nketiah in, he'd also run the full length of the pitch. Yeah. You could see him like heavy breathing like this before the penalty. So it is a lot more difficult. If you played professional football or even football at any level, you run around for 90 minutes and run 10 kilometers. By the end of it, you are knackered. So we'll cut him some slack. But I had Fabianski on my bench and Mateta in my starting 11. And I was like, oh my God, if this gets saved, I'm going to cry. So yeah, Mateta is fantastic. He's up to 7.3 million now. I will say what I think is so good about what Glasner's doing is there's like ultimate trust in Mateta. There was an interview with Chris Wood after one of the recent games, and he said what he loves about Nuno is Nuno's placed complete faith in him. Wood doesn't have to worry about if he's starting the next game. And I think forwards really struggle with that when they're in and out of the squad and they don't have their starting. Glasner's shown that confidence in him. And even when he drops a couple of stinkers, he's still starting. So I think that really, really helps him in terms of confidence. I'm not even going to look at the stats because I look at stats on so many players and I know that Mateta's are just average.
Yeah.
But he's taking his shots a little bit quicker. You know, you like when some players like Dilly Dallo on the ball and they're not really sure when to shoot and they look a little bit unnatural. He's just really sharp at the moment. And both of his recent goals were taken so like instinctively, I'd say.
Yeah, well, he even tried it in the first half against West Ham. He was about 30 yards out to the right and he had a shot. Just tried to, take it really quickly and it does work. And that's what happens when he's got his confidence. And, Palace do score goals now that we're getting our team kind of flowing again. So that's really good to see. And realistically, Mateta's going to score them. Like, I think after him, Chalobah, Gay are like top goal scorers, with Eze. So we don't have too many goals around him. But with Eze in that team creating, like Mateta's going to get some goals, isn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Right. We'll stop ourselves there because I can just feel us getting a bit too excited about Mateta. So I'll move on to the defence then. Back-to-back clean sheets. You're obviously not conceding many goals as well, even in the games. It was before the, you probably all know the stats, but after the Arsenal game, obviously clean sheet against Bournemouth, 1 goal conceded against Southampton, 1 against Chelsea, and then back-to-back cleans. So you've only conceded 2 goals in 5 games.
It's really good.
It's a really nice run. Obviously, when I bought Munoz, it wasn't for the clean sheets, but do you feel like you're looking a lot better defensively? And do you know what the reason is? Is it just a little bit more time together?
I think it's a bit of adjustment. We've lost Chalobah now, but Richards come in these last 2 games and look really good. So that's really good to see. We won't be signing a replacement centre-back. So I think it is a little bit of time will tell against the bigger teams to see how Richards does, because against Sancho, he got absolutely skinned. So there is that bit of that worry if Minos is a bit too high. But, you know, if you had hindsight, you would have attacked Palace for the away fixtures, because I think we've conceded the joint least away goals
Okay.
in the Premier League this season, about 12 or 11, which has been ridiculous. But that's because we haven't played like Man United, Man City, Newcastle, Spurs all away from home. So that'll be interesting to see how we do. But the defence is looking really, really good. And what's really nice to see as well is we've got the midfield kind of gelling. I know I'm saying when Wharton comes back in, but Hughes is playing really well now. Lerma does play well. Kamada played really well for the first time on the weekend.
I've been really impressed with Kamada recently, because I thought he'd be deployed in more of an advanced role when you signed him, but he's just dropped a little bit and he looks really good, doesn't he?
Yeah, for sure. And it's really interesting because we had, for me, one of the best future midfielders in Decore, but he suffered that Achilles injury against Luton last season, and he's still not like getting back to his best, and he's still on the bench a lot. So Kamada's had to fill in that slot. So that's been really good to see. But yeah, I think it's just the system we got going with Glasner at the moment. It's fun, but we can keep clean sheets, and that's really, really nice to see.
It's what Amorim wants to do.
Yeah,
we want to get to the point, because we were discussing off camera, it's a very similar system, but he's doing it the right way. Cool. Anything else you want to say on Palace, or do you think we've covered it?
Boom, boom, boom. Apart from that,
I was going to break out into song, but I don't want to get copyright strike. So cool. So the only thing on West Ham, then obviously the team they played against, is just to note Fabianski started and Areola was on the bench. So if you've got Fabianski in your team, you might need him for maybe blank game week 29, potentially, depending on who your goalkeeper is. Like, I might sign Alisson this week, and obviously if Liverpool do reach the FL Cup final, they'll blank, but it's nice to know you've got Fabianski sat there. So I think that's the only thing. You'd expect him to keep his place, and we'll assess that. Outside of that, I'm not at all interested in West Ham assets right now.
Yeah, well, Potter needs time. He does. He did at Brighton. They're in a relegation battle, them kind of first year and a half that he was still there, you know, and then they grow into it. At the moment, Somerville's injured, Bowen's injured. They don't really have the depth. They're kind of playing Cresswell and Emerson, which is crazy in 2025, in my opinion. You know, Mavropanos is not a Premier League defender, I don't think. Kilman is, but he needs to suit a system. And he's got weighted pressure being so much, which I feel sorry for him, because I do think he can play to a good level.
Absolutely.
And then you look at some of their other signings, like Guido Rodriguez, is it? He played 45 minutes against us. I genuinely didn't know he was on the pitch until we got subbed off at half time. So there's a lot of work for Potter to do, and nothing's happening in January yet, which I'm really shocked about, because they have no striker, you know. So against us, it was Paqueta, I think, up top.
It's a mess. They need Bowen back desperately.
Yeah, I think he's back mid-Feb or something. But if you're losing him and, you know, you're having to play Paqueta up top, that's not his position. That is a big worry. So yeah, you've got to avoid West Ham for a month or two at least.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, I'm getting a hot thing about John Philippe. Right, let's move on to Arsenal 2, Villa 2. From an FPL perspective, I don't really care for Arsenal right now. They're just not performing at a high enough level. They're not keeping the clean sheets, and you're not going probably near their attackers. I mean, if you own some of them, you could keep them. Saliba obviously wasn't in the squad for this game. I think that was the big news. And as soon as you see that, you're like, well, then the chance for a clean sheet is probably quite low. Gabriel is performing at an incredible level right now, though. Just from like a footballing, ignore FPL, he's been brilliant. And I mean, they didn't concede until late on, so there was a chance for a clean sheet there. But the player I've been most impressed with in their entire team is Lewis Skelly.
Yeah,
and I think Arsenal fans will be glad that he's going to get some airtime, because no one's really talking about it. You can tell he's a midfielder, is the best compliment I could give to him, because he's silky smooth on the ball. But also for his age, not really bullied too often. You thought he'd get sort of chucked off the ball and sort of pushed around, but he's physically okay as well. I could see him being England's future left back. Him and Lewis Hall this season, I think, are the two standouts. And it's nice that England are starting to get some good left backs, because we can't rely on Luke Shaw on his hamstrings. So I think having Lewis Skelly in there is potentially quite good. If he keeps his place long term, then we start thinking about him for FPL, I think, as well.
Yeah, I think so. And yeah, it's so interesting, because they do, like, top managers do like this kind of like inverted fullback drifts into the middle. So it does suit maybe a more natural centre mid. He does look really good. He's up for every game, you know, he's got that. And I think one of my kind of criticisms of Arteta before was they have a great academy. This is kind of my criticism of the bigger sides. They bring in such big talents, and they maybe don't give them game time quick enough. And I feel like Arteta's had to bring him in because of the quality they have or the injuries they have. And it's worked out for him, but he's given him his game time now, and it's working really well.
Yeah, I think Trossard and Martinelli, I think that combination, for me, Arsenal fans might disagree, that combination of Martinelli on the right, Trossard on the left, I think is their best option at the moment.
Yeah.
Sterling had a couple of good moments in one of the last 8 games he's played, but it's so minimal. He came on. There was a moment in like the 93rd minute, he gave the ball away and then made a foul. And I was like, if I was watching that as an Arsenal fan, I would have lost my mind. But I think Martinelli on the right is much better than any other option they've got right now. Nwaneri was really good there, but obviously picked up the injury. But Martinelli was just looking to get in behind a little bit more. He was making some of the runs that Saka makes, and I think that helps the team overall. I think they both had good games, but I'm not looking at either of those. I'd much rather Eze at a very similar price.
Yeah, for sure. And it's that them type of players for me at the moment aren't title challengers, and that's a big issue. And Odegaard's kind of not creating enough in FPL, is he, in terms of points? So maybe he's doing the bit before the goals or the assists. But for FPL, you don't want to bring him in either. So there is literally no one guaranteed there that you want. And as you said, Gabriel's kind of single-handedly holding that defence. And if Saliba was in that team, I think they would have kept a clean sheet because Marino for the first goal was poor and their defence was poor for the second goal as well. So, yeah, it's not good for Arsenal in terms of FPL.
On their defence, a lot of people we sat there with Raya and Gabriel. Yeah. Their fixtures are Wolves, City, Leicester, West Ham, Forest, United. It's not a bad run. And then if they play in 29, it'll be against Chelsea. If you had double defence, would you look to move off right now? Or do you just think there are other issues to sort in your team? Like, how would you feel if you own 2 Arsenal defenders?
If you've got Raya, then Raya to Alisson feels like the easy one, done it for the double game week. And it just feels like you're covering yourself a little bit. You can maybe use players elsewhere. Like instead of getting a Kanata, you can get a better 5 mil defender who's good long term. And Alisson will get you clean sheets long term, like he will. So for that, yeah. But then Gabriel, I'm even like, do you want Gabriel at the moment? Even though he does do well, like in terms of FPL, you've got Wolves and Leicester, which look really good, and the others don't. And it's like for 6 mil, it's such a hard price range because you need him to get points, maybe in 3 or 4 of them 5 game weeks to kind of back that value, maybe sometimes, for me anyways. But I guess you can keep him, get rid of the double up because you don't need it. And it's not really worrying your rank now because not many are doubling up.
Yeah, I am slightly tempted by something like Gabriel to Van Dijk, but then I just feel like after the Wolves game, I'm then going to think, well, I probably want Gabriel back in, and I will lose quite a decent amount of value, I think, on Gabriel as well with the money tied up. I think Gabriel's fine. Yeah, I wouldn't really want Raya right now, and I think Pickford and Alisson are sat there as 2 options with the double. Villa are very interesting. Their next 3 games are West Ham, Wolves, Ipswich. They feel like huge game sort of potential. Rodgers, is he back to being a buy now, do you think, ahead of those 3? Bearing in mind he might blank in 29?
I've had him as a set and forget. So for me, he's always been really good. Villa are interesting because before the Everton match, they actually lost like their last 4 or 5 away games in a row.
Awful run,
So I guess it's kind of good to have someone like a Rodgers, maybe instead of a Watkins, because then you can kind of bench him for them games if your squad's good enough. But they kind of look like they're turning a little bit of a corner. Watkins is firing a bit more. To go from 2 goals down to 2 always really good still.
You'd imagine that'll give him a little boost as well.
Yeah, exactly. And then Duran's in, Marlon's going to play for them soon as well. So they are a really interesting team. I think it's kind of like get Rodgers for now because he seems like the actual set and forget, and he's the one who's going to start every game, whereas the others could be more rotation risks.
Exactly. And again, just bear in mind that if Liverpool do reach the EFL Cup final, so if they overturn that deficit against Spurs, they will blank in 29 Villa. But we won't find that out until the gap between 24 and 25. So if you want to bring in Rodgers for West Ham, Wolves, Ipswich, I've honestly got no issue with that. But I think that's mainly it on Arsenal. Villa 2-2, a decent game to watch. But yeah, I'm not massively interested in buying any assets from either team at the moment. The next game, I watched this when I was around my sister's house. Like Everton 3, Spurs 2. Everton turned into some sort of monstrous team. I'm really finding this difficult. Has Moyes done something to them to get them playing like this? Or was that just Spurs being Spurs? I've got no idea.
Yeah, it's so interesting, isn't it? And well, when Calvert-Lewin does that, that's like bringing back his glory days, isn't it?
He took that goal so well.
And to have the speed to turn in and out like that and then finish kind of near side as well was such a good goal. It'll be interesting now because that's the one, if they had lost that, no one would really be focusing on Everton. But even Ndai's goal was really good as well. But there is this kind of thing. It's against Spurs at the moment. They don't have the centre-backs they want. Dragusin ain't good enough. Ben Davies isn't good enough. So can you kind of go on Everton at the moment? I think just this away, maybe see how they do against, who is it this week? Brighton, I think they've got this week.
Yeah, Brighton away.
And that's a really true test. And then you can kind of go from there, see if you can attack them in the double game week.
Spurs have won 1 of their past 12 games. 1 in 12. Do you know who that was against? Southampton.
Really?
That's the only game they've won in their last 12. It's not good right now. So, yeah, I mean, Everton had 5 big chances in this game and Spurs only had 2. They managed 12 shots. Kinski made 4 saves. I mean, it was a deserved win. I mean, in fact, the fact Spurs got 2 goals maybe was undeserved. I do want to see if Moyes has got something out of them. Like, if they start scoring goals, and I'm all aboard the likes of DCL and Ndiaye. They're both £5.4 million forwards. If you're sat there with João Pedro or Jimenez, or maybe you've got a dud 8th attacker and a 3rd forward, you could do worse than bringing in the pair of them. In terms of who's the better footballer, Ndiaye is magnificent. Like, when I watch him, I'm like, that is a proper player. Like, he's dribbling ability, he's runs in behind. Like, I think he's intelligent. He's not a very good finisher though. And also, his goal threat is so minimal, but a lot of that was under Dyche, so I'm finding it difficult to know. DCL was probably a better FPL asset. His minutes are slightly better. He's probably first choice penalty taker, and he'll get more chances. But DCL is officially the worst forward in the Premier League for conversion rate. It's like really bad. I think only 1 in 5 or 1 in 6 shots are on target. He's a really bad finisher.
Yeah.
Are you interested at all? Or do you think it's one of those you'll probably steer clear?
No, I'm steering clear. I'm not. Let's talk FPL on this one because I feel like
Andy loves DCL, doesn't he?
Yeah, he'll hear this segment and be buzzing that you can actually have some kind of something to back up him wanting to bring him in. But yeah, for me, just going to leave at the moment because I don't know if Everton are going to create enough of chances as well. And if he's not taking too many of the chances they're giving him at the moment, it feels just too much of a risk.
I think João Pedro has been really bad recently. I'm going to discuss João Pedro. So I felt like if I was sat there with him there and I didn't want to get up to Gakpo where I couldn't and I wasn't interested in Mateta, but I just wanted to get rid of João Pedro. I mean, you're not going to do any worse getting rid of João Pedro for DCL. They're probably similar assets where they'll just frustrate you. And the good thing is they have a game in Game Week 29, right? So at least it's a decent run of fixtures. They've got Leicester in 24. The only thing I will say about Everton is like they've got the same set of fixtures they always had, plus a Liverpool game. If you weren't interested in them before the Liverpool double was added, you're bringing in an asset because they have an extra game against the best team in the league. It feels a bit unnecessary. So I'm not going to do it unless I get an injury to one of my forwards because I'm not selling Mateta, Isak, or who's my other forward? Wood. There you go. I could sell Wood for Gakpo. Anyway, I'm not going to sell any of my 3 forwards for the time being. I think it just doesn't make sense for me. On Spurs, I think the only really notable thing for them is that Solanke seems to have picked up an injury. Early reports, and it's very early, I've not got confirmation, is that it could be up to 6 weeks, although Ange said it was not a serious injury. So I think he was basically ruling out an ACL, probably ruling out an MCL as well, but it sounds like it could keep him out for a little bit. If you own him, I'd keep him because it's Leicester at home, and it's a real shame if he does miss that, and just see if we get any news throughout the week. But I think for now, he's probably a sell, and I probably wouldn't go to DCL.
Yeah, I mean, as well, like Wissa is there. We're talking about him earlier. He just feels more
thing,
prolific. So, and what was it? I think was it like Solanke attempting a shot that got him injured? So I don't know what could have caused that for too long. So
yeah, maybe
we'll have to wait and see. It'll be interesting. But yeah, Wissa for me out of the 3.
Or even Gakpo.
True.
If you don't want to attack the double. And I think you've got the money or the best forward in the league, Jean-Philippe Mateta.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. So that was Everton 3, Spurs 2. Big performance from Everton. I just want to assess how they sort of get on moving forward. Oh, do we have to do this? The next game, Manchester United 1, Brighton 3.
Here we go.
I put 1 step forward, 2 steps back. It's like half a step forward, 9 steps back, it feels like at the moment. We're one of the worst teams in the league. I had this realization the other day that we're just one of the worst teams in the league. We absolutely suck. And it felt much better. It was, just sort of like acceptance. Was it the 5 stages of grief? Is that what it is? But I went through the denial stage. I went through the anger stage. I'm now at acceptance. I've accepted we're absolutely terrible. And that's a nice feeling.
Yeah, join the club. As a fan, he's had that for probably 7 of the last 10 years at points this season. It does make sense to kind of accept a bit more. But it is interesting with United. It's like, it's literally kind of like what bottom half table teams do when they're doing bad. Turn up against the bigger teams because there's more pressure or they're more up for it because maybe they feel a little bit less nervous because it's like they're not expected to win. And then the ones that are expected to win, it's like, oh, it's too much pressure and they're just buckling under it completely.
Yeah, like the issue is we aren't creating many chances. That's the first issue. The next issue is that we're not creating many chances and the players that we have are so bad at finishing. Like what we need to do with our current set of players is create 6 or 7 big chances a game and we'll take 2 of them. When we're only creating 1 at most, then we're not going to finish enough of them. I mean, our only goal was a penalty. And yes, it was a penalty, but that's not good enough at home against a team like Brighton who do concede chances. You want a little bit more there.
Wasn't that like your only shot on target as well?
Probably.
Yeah, so it's
probably
just not creating enough and you've got 2 forwards who need to be fed.
I will say Xerxes has been a lot better than Højlund, so I would expect him to continue starting. He's offering a bit more, but it's just not good. I actually saw FPL Harry, because he owns Ahmad and Bruno. He tweeted that since October, Man United have only scored 1 goal that hasn't been scored or assisted by Ahmad or Bruno.
That is crazy.
So 18 of the 19 goals, Ahmad and Bruno have had an involvement in it. The first thing I know is that how we only scored 19 goals since October. That's a worrying stat, firstly. The one way you could look at this is that's great. If United score, it's Ahmad or Bruno. And you don't need United to score lots of goals to get points from them. But then the next point is, why are we not scoring more goals? And I wouldn't want to desperately own a United asset at the moment. I think Ahmad and Bruno are both still okay buyers, but I'd prefer Mbeumo to Bruno. And I'd probably... Ahmad might be one of the better cheap assets. I still think I might prefer Rodgers or Jacob Murphy, still slightly.
Yeah, because Ahmad may play right wing back certain games. You never know. And it's not good if they're the only two getting the points at the moment, because actually you need someone to be finishing Bruno's chances. I guess it's kind of one of the other reasons you want him at that price range. So it's really interesting with them. And I think it's just a bunch of players who can't deal with these tactics in terms of like they're not suited to the press or whatever, or the high attack. And we're just seeing it look poor. Just got to wait till the end of the season, I think, sadly for you guys.
I can't believe I'm going to sit here and say this. I think the aim is to avoid relegation.
I love that.
Because we don't have the ability to get into Europe, but even if we could sneak a Europa Conference League place, we don't need that right now. So I think the aim is to avoid relegation, try and do our best to go as far as possible in Europe. If we can win the Europa League, great. And then go from there. And I think that's it. Maybe try and pick up the FA Cup somehow, but I just don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah, for sure. What happens with Ahmad when you've got Europa League? Will he be a rotation risk for?
No, I don't think so. What I've noticed about Ahmad is he's a fitness monster, like more than Fernandes. He is sprinting for the full 90, and he's our best right wing back, and he's our best number 10. So I can't see him missing games. I was worried at the start of the season when he's starting to get game time. I was like, oh, maybe he's just not a rotation risk. No, he's just so good.
Yeah.
The only Brighton player I think really worth discussing is João Pedro. He didn't have a shot in this game. He did have a disallowed goal, which obviously you do have to pay attention to. But outside of that, which obviously isn't registered as a shot because it was disallowed, he had 0 shots. That now means he's averaging 0.1 XG per 90 over the past 8 game weeks. So in 8 games, he's not reached 1 XG.
That is crazy. I've had him probably for that whole time. But
that's worse than, I would say, 80% of defenders in the league. Like he's got less goal threat than most centre-backs.
Yeah, that is ridiculous. I have actually benched him for the last month. So the only points I missed out on was the Arsenal pen, but it's a pen. But
exactly. And in the Arsenal game, he didn't have a shot again.
Exactly. So, and him up top isn't great for FPL at all. Welbeck's back now, so he is going to drop a bit. But Rutter's getting a few goals. I know I was intrigued yesterday because Rutter came on and then Pedro was behind. So if that kind of happens long term, Pedro could be better again in terms of assists and that. But we were talking about the better players around that price range, and there is much better players.
Yeah, he's a 90-minute man on penalties.
Yeah.
So it's difficult to sell a player like that. But I would be extremely tempted. Like Welbeck was back in the team. I see Welbeck back. I see playing against United. João Pedro in the 10 with Welbeck in front of him. Yeah. I put a tweet out saying he's going to go mad today. And they've scored 3 goals and he's got nothing.
I mean, he did get the goal. I know it's disallowed and the foul, I think it was probably a foul in the end. But,
I guess it's a different narrative if he scores that, absolutely. But I've not been impressed. I'll just leave it there. I sold him 5 weeks ago and I've not really looked back. He did get back-to-back 9 points as soon as I sold him, which was very upsetting. But again, it was 2 assists that were quite fortunate and then a penalty. Yeah. So I'd have no issue selling him, but he might get a little bit of joy against Everton this week. Cool. Forest 3, Southampton 2. Wasn't expecting the scoreline, and maybe not the most dominant performance, but the scoreline, I think, flatters Southampton slightly. I would say until the final moments of the game when Southampton really picked it up, it was relatively, I'd call it like a routine victory for Forest. They're flying this season.
Yeah. I said, I think a month or so ago, this doesn't feel like a blip. Like now you're getting to that time.
I agree.
And in terms of FPL, it even doesn't feel like a blip. Their assets are still providing. Wood's taking his chances when he's getting barely any at times. And they've got so many players. What's really good about Forest is they have so many players who can score or assist. And that's in and out of FPL terms. So really exciting team. Nuno doing his Wolves days again, where he got them 7th, I want to say.
Back-to-back 7th places, I think they had,
So he has that experience there, and it's nice to see him doing well after kind of fading at Spurs. That is nice. And Forest are historically a big club, so kind of see them back up there is pretty cool, I think.
I don't know how to feel about Chris Wood, because Chris Wood almost makes me want to have an existential crisis, because I believe in data and I believe in XG, and he makes me look like a mug every single week. His data's not good, but he's a great finisher. And maybe something that does need to be more involved in data. I don't think this disproves XG. All XG is telling you roughly the quality of the chance, right? Yeah. That's all an XG data is. It's to tell you from this position, this is roughly how much chance they would have of scoring. but maybe there needs to be more context added with people's conversion rates, their XGI delta, which says how much they over or underperform their data. And Chris Wood is just taking every chance well. The assist was quite fortunate, right? It was a little tiny touch on his foot, but his pressing was quite good for it. And what I will say is most of his goals recently have been so well taken.
Yeah.
Like that header was quite a low XG chance because it was a brilliantly taken header. The goal against Liverpool on his left foot was really well taken. I agree exactly with what you've said, that there was a moment recently when I just said, this isn't a good run of form. They're just a good team.
Yeah.
And it feels like other than an injury, and I'm not hoping for this, of course, but other than an injury to maybe Chris Wood, I feel like they could cope with a lot. Morato, when he comes on, is really good. If they had an injury to one of the centre-backs, I still feel like he'd do a decent job. They've got a little bit of depth with Moreno at fullback. The midfield, they've got options as well. When Alanga or Hudson-Odoi is not playing, they still create chances. I just look at that team and think, they look really good for a top 4 finish, which is mental.
Yeah, I mean, Chris Wood's like 34 and he's like getting better, which I love to see in certain older players as well.
It's like Vardy-esque.
Yeah, and it's really interesting as well with Forest, like the players they have around him. I know Forest signed probably about 50 players since they got promoted, which maybe got them points deductions last season, but it's reaped its rewards, which is really weird to say. And they have an owner who, no matter what you think of him as a person or how much he maybe shouldn't be punching on TV monitors, he wants to win stuff. And I think that's why this isn't a blip, because if he needs to, he'll back the manager even more. And he doesn't need to at the moment because Gibbs White is an amazing number 10.
Gibbs White's done really well in FPL too. He keeps returning.
Yeah, I thought about him a couple of weeks ago. That's when I went for Eze instead. I think they're basically the same at the moment. Gibbs White's a bit cheaper, so that maybe would have been the better option. But he does so much. He's on set pieces as well. I think some of them anyways, the corners. He's just such a good player. And I think that's when you've got to take into account as well with Woods finishing like XG with a bit of the eye test, because it's not like Woods getting lucky, I would say, in my opinion. I know some people may say he is. It's not. He's just a really good finisher. I think that's the same with Mateta sometimes. He's a really good finisher. And, you know, Gibbs White, he's a really good eye test. Maybe sometimes his stats won't look at it, but I think you've got to combine the two sometimes in FPL.
I said, because of this podcast, actually, that on my YouTube channel, it's very data heavy, and I like stats personally myself, but I've also got a background in football and I like watching. I said for this podcast, it was like a promise I made to myself that I'd watch a lot more football this year. I would usually watch a couple of games, maybe some of the highlights, but I said for this podcast, I'm going to do a lot more. And eye test is partially the reason I bought Mateta and Wood. And this goes to show that I think a one-size-fits-all approach doesn't work. I think if you only rely on eye test, you'll miss a lot. And I think if you only rely on data, I think you'll miss a lot as well. So, yeah, I think trying to combine wherever possible. The fixtures are quite interesting for Forest, right? Because they've got Bournemouth, Brighton, Fulham, Newcastle, Arsenal, Man City, up till 28. It's not a great run of fixtures defensively or offensively. Like, I don't love those. But then they play against Ipswich in game week 29, which is the blank game week, in which Chris Wood's probably a captaincy shout, depending which team's blank. Would you go out there and buy Chris Wood still? Do you think he's still a good purchase? Or do you think you'd look elsewhere to a Gakpo, to a Mateta with slightly better fixtures?
It's really hard, that, because he has obviously taken his chances really well. But against maybe some of the bigger teams, against Liverpool, he did only get the one chance. And yes, he scored. But you do have to have that debate in your head. Is it worth it when maybe someone, as we keep on saying, like a Whistle or even a Calvert-Lewin, maybe might get more opportunities? And even though they might only score one of their opportunities, it might level with Woods. So it's a really hard one. I think, again, I keep on saying it depends on your rank sometimes, because if you're chasing, why not go for someone else? But if you're if you're at the top of your table and you're with your mates, you know, I do this a little bit sometimes. You see everyone's got Wood, definitely hold on to him for now.
He was 90% ownership in the top 10K. Like, he's basically owned by everyone. So yeah, I think if you're playing defensively, still buy Wood, because he'll still tick along in those games. Like, Nottingham Forest aren't going to blank in all of those games, and he's getting pretty much all of their goals.
Definitely.
So yeah, I would still go for it if you're protecting. But yeah, if you're chasing, or you just back data and you're like, eventually he's going to stop scoring, then maybe. And I think it's the same for the defenders. I wouldn't go out there and buy Olarena now or Milinkovic. No. The fixtures aren't there. But if you own them, you keep them and you can start them in a lot of those games. So it's the classic, don't buy, don't sell. I would just keep the assets that you probably have. Cool. Right, final game of the game week in terms of what we've seen then, because obviously we've not seen the Chelsea-Wolves game. Ipswich 0, Man City 6. I didn't see this coming, I'll be honest. City have been winning games, but not convincingly. Ipswich, I think, are better than Leicester and Southampton defensively. Like, when I watch them, they sometimes look a little bit more resolute. I didn't see 6-0. And it was like a training ground exercise. Like, Ipswich weren't even really bothering closing down. City weren't really it was just really easy. We do it in like football, but attack first defense. when the defenders defend, because it's training, they're sort of strolling about, it was just really easy.
Yeah, it's really weird, Ipswich, sometimes. I did the away game with Palace. We won 1-0. I was like, they were just really poor. And then 2 weeks later, they beat Chelsea 2-0 and they look a bit better. And they had like 4 draws in a row or whatever at some point. So they've shown potential. And then I think, when you just have them December and January fixtures, you put in so much work in and you're a weaker squad. Sometimes these type of games are going to come up. And a couple of the goals, like Jack Clark gave the ball away for Haaland's goal. He must have had Haaland in his fantasy team for that one. Another one was like deflection or a pass back and it didn't work out.
Yep.
And so it just kind of one of them days where I would probably say if you're an Ipswich fan, you're kind of happy it happened all in one go because you can just like move on. But, City looked really good. Foden looked really good. Did have a browse at their fixtures and I was like, they're ridiculously tough. So he's definitely a no-go for me at the moment. But
yeah, their fixtures are Chelsea, Arsenal, Newcastle, Liverpool, Spurs, Forest. Now, Chelsea's not an awful game. Spurs in there's not bad. But Arsenal, Newcastle, Liverpool, Forest are the 4 best defences in the league at the moment. There's just no desire for me to go for it. I mean, if Foden keeps going at that rate, he's got 5 attacking returns in 2 weeks, then maybe. If you're wondering what's happened to Foden that's made him play like this, they've started Núñez at right back the last couple of games and Rico Lewis has dropped out. So we've got Mateus Núñez at right back and he's actually not inverting, he's overlapping, which is quite rare, but he's holding some width, which allows Foden to play on the right, but drift central. So what they've essentially done is found a way to have De Bruyne in the middle and also Foden with Núñez providing the width. What that means is Foden looks really good. Yeah. De Bruyne looks really good when he's starting, but also Rico Lewis is an absolute sell now. Yeah. With those fixtures, he was anyway.
Yeah.
But I think if you're still owning Rico Lewis right now, I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't start for the foreseeable future because Núñez is playing that role really, really well.
Yeah, I'm also not shocked to see them doing a bit better with Kyle Walker out the team. I just think he's past it in terms of defensive ability and he was a bit of an error for their kind of conceding goals. So now they've adapted and Pep's more adapted to suit his player of the year from last year.
Yeah.
It's reaping its rewards, definitely.
Haaland, 1 return, no bonus. I mean, if you held him to this point, he's got a couple of returns recently. Great, you sell him now. Yeah. You've got to sell him ahead of this run. There's no desire for me to hold Haaland for Chelsea, Arsenal, Newcastle, Liverpool, Spurs, Forest.
Yeah, no, it's always going to be like the 2% in the back of my head, like he could bang.
Yeah.
But it's like 15 mil. You can just do so much better dividing that amongst lots of players in your team.
I will just say from 29 and beyond, their fixtures start to improve again. So when we do wildcard, I think a lot of us will wildcard around game week 30, 31.
Yeah.
I think there will absolutely be a desire to go out and get Haaland then if our team value's gone up and if maybe let's say we had an injury to a Palmer or a Salah and we had the funds, then I could see us returning to Haaland, but I definitely won't own Haaland until game week 29 at the earliest.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting with that because I feel like you'd have to bring him in with a wild card because you've got the assistant manager chip, so you need 1.5 mil. So
this
like
is the
to
other
play
thing,
around with it for like 6 weeks isn't long in FPL to have funds available, think long term, and then bring in someone who's 15 mil.
Yeah.
Like that is so hard to do. So if you want him in that kind of end of season, you're going to really have to plan for that.
I think anyone that free hits in 29 will probably have Haaland because it'd be a nice option to have him. But I think, I wouldn't be surprised if I don't own Haaland for the rest of the season. I can't believe that's the case after the way he started. Cool. And then I think that's pretty much it on City. Just I would probably avoid. I actually think Foden's a fine sell. I don't think you need to do it this week. Chelsea's a fine game, but then going to Arsenal, Newcastle, Liverpool, I think you do. So if you were looking to do Foden to Diaz and you're a little bit less sure now, you're not sure if you want to go in Burmo, Gordon, give him 1 more week, Foden, absolutely fine. It's at home, and then maybe look to move him on after that.
Yeah, because I think Saliba may not be ready for they're targeting the City game for Saliba.
Okay, is that the update? Okay.
Yeah, so that'll be really interesting to him because if Saliba is out, and Foden does well against Chelsea, then you keep him again, and then maybe you just keep him a few more weeks after that.
Absolutely. Cool. And then the other game is Chelsea Wolves. We've not seen it yet. Obviously, we don't know yet the extent if Palmer is injured or out. Same with Enzo, Colwill. I'll discuss that throughout the week on my YouTube channel and stuff like that. And maybe we'll go into next week, obviously, FPL Therapy episode. If they are still out or if there are any injuries, we can deal with that discussion. What are your predictions for Chelsea Wolves? I always make us look like idiots when I do this. Chelsea Wolves prediction. They'll know at the time of listening and watching what the score was.
2-1 Chelsea. I think Wolves have been slipping down a bit lately, and this is a big game for both teams. Chelsea, I don't think have won in the last 5 Premier League games. They need that win. So
I'm going to say Chelsea 2-0. Cole Palmer misses out, which means Enzo Fernandez starts as the 10. Enzo Fernandez scores 2 penalties, and Sanchez makes 15 saves, and they keep a clean sheet.
Oh, yeah, cool. Yeah, definitely.
It's reasonable. It has nothing to do with my team. It's just a prediction that I have right now. Okay, cool. Right, next section is some quick fire questions. I'll turn the laptop away so that you can't see them. So there are going to be 6 quick fire questions for you. Some of the stuff we've discussed already, and I just want your honest, quick answer. If you want to give a little bit, 5 seconds of justification, that's fine. Or if you just want to go for like a one-word answer, that's okay too. Ready?
Yep.
Who are the 3 best Liverpool assets to own?
Salah, Trent, and Gakpo.
If not Gakpo?
Allison.
Perfect. Best midfielder to buy under the price of 5.5 million.
So at the time of recording, Rodgers is still in there. So
Okay.
I'd say him, but I really like the look of Damnegard.
Oh, okay. That's a cheeky shout. He didn't really speak about it much. Nice. Best goalkeeper to buy this week.
If you have the money, Allison. If you don't, Dean Henderson.
Very nice. A little bit of Crystal Palace bias.
Yeah, got to.
Mateta or Chris Wood to buy this week.
There ain't no striker better than Jean-Philippe Mateta, mate. So definitely Mateta.
Okay. Captain Salah against Ipswich or Isak against Southampton.
Salah.
And then best defender to buy under the price of 5 million.
So I'm not going to go Palace here because I'm trying to push that in as much as possible in this. But I like the look of Kirkes, both short-term and long-term.
Perfect. Yeah, I actually really like the Bournemouth defensive fixtures actually over the next 3 or 4 aren't that bad.
Yeah, and he's basically a winger sometimes, so it's great.
I like it. Cool. Smashed it. So guys, this podcast continues to be sponsored by the wonderful people over at Club, which is a free-to-play fantasy football mobile game. There will be a link down below in the description, so please do check it out. But each week we get our guests to meet with our agent, which is Manny, and try and pull us a highly rated player. So every 4 hours, you can meet with the agent, and sometimes very good, sometimes not so good. So I'll show you my team at the moment. In terms of the good, Isak, Salah, Sarr as a front line with Jackson on the bench looks pretty strong. Midfield is actually looking a little bit better with Ahmad, Gibbs White, Joelinton, but I'm so weak in the midfield, I've had to go for a 4-3-3 rather than a 3-5-2. And I've got some decent defenders. Robinson, Aina, Gabriel, Henderson is honestly looking really strong. Since about October, I've been saying I'd like a really good midfielder, you know, like whether it be a purple player or just someone that's really usable. So I would ideally like you to get me a midfielder. There's no pressure, of course, but I'll hand the phone to you. All you have to do is click meet now and then give me a bit of information about the player. And I'm hoping it's a decent option.
Cool.
Oh no, a little laugh and then cool. That sounds bad. Is it bad?
Yeah.
Okay, what rating?
79.
79. Are they usable? Do they start?
They're not a midfielder. They're in and out of the team.
Oh, okay. Okay. What position? Midfield? So what?
Forward.
Forward. Okay, what team?
Brighton, which is a double whammy for me.
It's not Welbeck, is it?
No. It's O'Reilly.
O'Reilly?
Yeah,
Interesting. Okay.
Because I'm sure does he play more midfield?
I think he's played both. He started a few. Do you know what? I'll sign him and we'll have a look at his data here and like in terms of his points and stuff. So he got an 18 point against Ipswich. Yeah, didn't start obviously against United. 12 pointer there.
I apologise, mate.
I'll give you a 3 out of 10 for that, Paul. But listen, it's not all on you. It's also on Manny. So we'll criticise Manny as well. But if you want to basically build out your club, you can see this week I've got 146 points. My opponent has 164. So I'm having a little bit of a stinker this week. But yeah, if you want to build out your own club, if you want to find out more, there'll be a link down below. A massive shout out to Club for continuing to sponsor the podcast. And I can't wait for some of the content we'll be creating in the future as well. Right, next section is the FPL Therapy prediction game. So if you are new to FPL Therapy, firstly, please consider subscribing and make sure to like and also rate 5-star on audio. Basically, we ask the guest each week to give 3 players under 10% that they think will perform well only for the upcoming week. So basically like a free hit. We didn't record one for 22 because it was obviously a quick turnaround. But in Game Week 21, our guest Tom predicted Eze, Mateta, and Onana, which gained him 6, 8, and 3. So that was 17 points, which actually puts him up into 5th. So as of right now, I'm still top of my own leaderboard with 26. Leon in second with 25. Praz and myself join in third with 20. So 26 to beat. And the first player you've gone for is getting 29 points again. And that is Jean-Philippe Mateta at 4.9%.
People might turn off this podcast the amount of times you said his name.
Everyone loves him too. He's already gone up in price. We're going to get him up to 12 million by the end of the season. Well, I genuinely actually think it's a good fixture for him though.
Yeah.
I think he'll get space against Brentford.
Yeah, for sure. Really good. And at home, taking his chances, you know, really good option.
Perfect. Right, next player. We actually didn't discuss him in the section. I don't think he's a buy, but I do like the game for him. It's Matoma against Everton.
Yeah, when you told me it was only for 1 week, I was like, just big punt there. And I was tempted by Welbeck, but with him just back, I'm not sure about him yet. Matoma's got double-digit hauls in his last 2 game weeks, so I thought he feels sometimes like last season, he was a bit like he'd have a period of really
quite
good...
streaky.
Yeah, so giving him a go.
Yep, I like it. You've actually gone nowhere near 10%, so your final asset's 5.7%. Kulusevski against Leicester at home.
Well, he's just a baller.
Yeah.
Eye test-wise, baller. Lovely goal against Everton. Just Leicester, like as I said, 7 losses in a row in the Premier League, conceding goals for fun. they're either going to have like Fez, Vestergaard, or Cody at the back. And I know Spurs don't have a striker, but Spurs will have pace and a high line. And I think there could be goals in that game. So Kulusevski for me.
Leicester are in trouble. One of my good friends is a Leicester fan, and he keeps telling me to stop speaking so badly of Leicester in the videos, and I can't help it because it's not a good position right now. Cool. So Mateta, let's say Mateta 17 points, Matoma 8. Yeah, I reckon you'll get close to 26.
Yeah.
Easy. Yeah.
Easy.
Jean-Philippe. Right. Both of our teams for Game Week 23 is the final section. So you've got 2 free transfers, 0.5 in the bank. So you have enough to activate the assistant manager chip coming up if you went for a cheaper option. So I'll read out your team for those on audio. Pickford in goal against Brighton away. A back 3 of Trent against Ipswich at home, Robinson against United at home, and Munoz against Brentford at home. You've currently got Gabriel benched for Robinson.
Yeah, that's changing every day, if I'm being honest.
I feel slightly offended, but I also do understand it. It's a discussion to be had.
Yeah.
Midfield 5 looks brilliant this week. So you've got Gordon against Southampton, Salah with the armband, Eze against Brentford, Palmer against City at the moment. Of course, we don't know the extent of if he is actually injured. And then Rodgers against West Ham at home. Beautiful front midfield 5. And then your front 2 is looking good as well. Wood against Bournemouth and Isak against Southampton. With genuine squad depth as well, João Pedro against Everton. I mean, if Leif Davis was a better defender for this week, you're looking close to a bench boost. It's quite strong.
Yeah, I do think my squad's very decent at the moment. I'm expecting another 100 points haul this weekend. But
So what's the plan with the 2 free transfers? Are you using them this week? And if not, what are you planning for the double?
I mean, I'm sure I've heard you say it before. If you've got a benching headache, I feel like there's no need to use a transfer, especially with everything coming up. Obviously, I'd really like Gakpo, but I can't really get him in unless I did 2 transfers, and I don't want to do that. So I think I'm going to roll, as I said to you earlier, kind of like the Newcastle assets for me. I could sell long next week.
So maybe use Gordon or Isak to fund a move to Gakpo. Is that
something like that?
Okay.
And then, just Gabriel. If Palmer's injured, I'd bring Gabriel, and I think over Pedro at the moment.
Okay. It's a nice team. I mean, you've already got Pickford as obviously another doubler as well. Is such an easy role. I mean, the only 2 players that I don't love there at the moment is João Pedro and Davis, and you're not having to start them anyway.
Yeah.
So, and sorry, by the way, Leif Davis, I love you really. Cool. Right, nice team. My team's looking okay, probably not quite as strong. So I've got Sanchez in goal against Man City. I'll see how Chelsea get on tonight. A really easy option for me is just sell Sanchez for Alisson, because I've got 3 free transfers, but also 1.5 in the bank. So I just comfortably have enough money to do Sanchez to Alisson and still leave money for flexibility. So that's just an easy move. And I like the exit and entry point. But moving forward, I still don't mind Sanchez. And it's so boring having Alisson for a double game week. So I'll think about it. My back 3 is Trent, Gabriel, and Munoz. I have Robinson on the bench. I have a big decision to make about Gabriel, Munoz, Robinson. Obviously, one needs to be benched. And I'll think about that. Midfield is currently Salah with the armband. Fernandes against Fulham. I'm really not expecting much in that game at Craven Cottage. Palmer and Rodgers. And then my front 3 is Isak, Wood, and Mateta. I think it's a good team. I would hope for a green arrow, but I don't think it looks particularly great. I've got Enzo on the bench, who's probably the standout issue in my team. I just don't love any of the cheap midfielders at the moment. If I could go from Enzo to Eze, I think I would do that in one move, but I'm short of that. We've spoke about Sarr, maybe not as interested. Ahmad, I don't want Bruno and Ahmad. Murphy could be an okay option, but we spoke about the fixtures are running out a little bit. I don't actually see an option for Enzo to anyone that really interests me other than the Bournemouth midfielders. But we spoke, they've got Nottingham Forest and then Liverpool. So it's really not a great... If I was to bring in Clive, I'd still bench him this week. So I think my plan right now with Enzo, because people keep telling me he's an issue, is to carry him through a couple more weeks, and then around 25, 26, look to move him on when Bournemouth have Southampton. And I think Enzo to Kleiber is currently on my mind.
Yeah, that's a good one. I actually took Enzo out for Eze a few weeks back.
Exactly. Like, if I could do that, it would be an easy move. I really like Eberechi, but I can't quite get there. So for me right now with 3 free transfers, I am looking at that third Liverpool. And the only reason is it's just that entry point against Ipswich at home. But as I said, there is some merit to me just thinking, do I wait? Because let's say I do Sanchez to Alisson this week. Feels great. Get a better goalkeeper, obviously. This is very sensationalized, but let's say Jota and Darwin both pick up long-term injuries. I'm going to be gutted that I went for Alisson, because I would go straight to Diaz in midfield, probably for Bruno, or I'd go for Gakpo. All you need is 1 or 2 injuries. And also, Alisson is really injury prone himself, right? He often picks up hamstring issues. There's a lot of games coming up at the moment. I don't think he'll be rotated, but could he pick up another injury? Absolutely. So there is some part of me that's thinking I could wait, but Sanchez against City away feels like a guaranteed 1 or 2 points.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting. It's a shame your attacks look so good ahead this week, because, I mean, Gakpo would be the option, wouldn't it?
I am still semi-tempted to do Gakpo to Wood, but off the back of Gakpo obviously blanking and then a Chris Wood 12-pointer, it feels really tricky.
Yeah.
I don't want to have too much recency bias, because that was always in my thinking, but now can I justify selling Chris Wood in this current run of form?
Don't know if you can. And I think you could probably, I know it's Ipswich, but not many people have Gakpo. So you could be like, see what your situation is for the double, isn't it?
Yeah. So I think right now, my main two options are Sanchez to Alisson or assess and keep the third slot open. Speaking of slot, one of the options is Arne Slot, of course, for the assistant managership. I'm just a little bit hesitant right now. I don't think Bournemouth and Everton are really easy fixtures, but they're obviously not going to get the table bonus. It feels like one of those games could be a draw, and I don't think they're going to go out and score loads of goals and definitely keep clean sheets. So I feel like going for Arne Slot is a slight risk, and I think I might want to save it for a little bit later in the season. So that's the plan right now. Other options do involve Robinson to Konate, but I really like Robinson as a decent sort of medium-term hold, but that's an option. And then also just selling Enzo for any other option just to give me a bit more squad depth. Because obviously, as of right now, my bench is Enzo against City, Robinson against United, and Vandenberg against Palace. So there are options. I feel like I'm in a good position with 3 frees and the money in the bank, and I'll assess throughout the week.
Yeah, that's fair. The only other one I'd suggest is Damsgaard, as I talked about him earlier for Enzo. But
he's playing incredibly well.
I think he's, what was the price range you said to me earlier? 5.5 mil?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's second most points recently.
He's one of those players. Why is he's just ticking along and I'm not really looking at him? I'm just pulling him up. So he's 5 million. Yeah, this is why. He gets like 6, 5, 7, 9. Like it's like Ward-Prowse. That was the player I was trying to think of. Ward-Prowse in previous seasons. At the end of the season, you're like, oh, why is Ward-Prowse the 6th top scorer midfielder? And then you look at his returns and he's like never hauled. So yeah, he's only got 1 10-pointer this season. The rest have been little ones. But the data's been okay. Is an option, you know, especially as the fixtures start to improve. And his starts have been really good. He started every game since game week 16 with 3 back-to-back 90s as well.
I think Enzo's been unlucky as well, though. I will say that. Like when I saw him Palace Chelsea, he could have scored 2. So
exactly. So I don't mind holding him. And for future weeks with my other 7 attackers, I can get away with benching Enzo most of the time. Cool. Fantastic. Right, mate. That's the end of the podcast. Thank you very much for coming on and sharing all of your Crystal Palace knowledge.
That's all right, mate. As we said, Mateta is king.
Mateta is king. As I said, I will link all of Luke's stuff down below. Check out YouTube, Spotify, TikTok, whatever floats your boat. You can find him on Twitter as well. And yeah, if you want to follow his insights on Crystal Palace throughout the season, as we approach, they'll have a double game week probably at some point as well. That will be extremely useful. And if you want more Mateta propaganda, you know where to go. You're going to lose followers after this.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, thank you very much for watching. If you are watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. If you're listening on audio, please rate 5-star. And I will catch you again next week for a very interesting guest.